Well, hello there everyone. Dark Souls is often considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time, and that's a sentiment that I can understand and even get behind. Personally, I prefer Dark Souls 2 and 3 over the first game, but it laid the groundwork for what was to come, and I do still love this game to death. I've beaten it around 20 times. On top of that, this game has a respectably sized roster of bosses totaling out at 26, which I shall be ranking today, finally finishing off the Dark Souls trilogy. Okay, technically I did an old Dark Souls boss ranking years ago, but that was terrible and on my old channel that no longer exists, so you're not going to find it. Either way, I will be excluding Priscilla from this list because I ain't evil enough to kill her. However, I'll also be including a certain mini-boss fight to make up for it, so we still have 26 entries to rank. Let's dive on in, shall we? Number 26, Capra Demon. Ah, you thought it was going to be Bed of Chaos. Give it about 2 minutes, we'll get there soon. There are 3 bosses in Dark Souls 1 that really go into the garbage heap, and they're all pretty bad, but I have a personal order for the bottom 3, and Capra Demon is the worst of the bunch for 3 reasons, in my opinion. 1. The dogs. This edition needs no explanation. The 2 dogs swarm you, making things a shitfest, and this plays a major part in how the fight will go, as you either die in the first 15 seconds, or you're golden. 2. The run back here is terrible. Something that applies to all 3 bosses in the bottom 3, but this one has both Dark Souls dogs and the only appearance of the Hollow Thieves, which are some of the worst enemies in the game because they can poison you and they love to fish for backstabs. 3. The area is just way too cluttered. Don't get me wrong, a small arena with an aggressive foe could be cool, but the trees and vines just get in the way and block so much of your view, and that can be a real problem when he has some lingering hitboxes and attacks that go through your shield. Lastly, the reason I think this fight is so bad is because the other 2 garbage bosses are in the second half of the game, when you've probably committed to beating the game and you've also got a complete build. But this guy is part of the Undead Burg, the first major area of the game, and I wouldn't be surprised if many players drop the game at this point because this guy will likely be your 3rd to 5th boss fight. Number 25, Gravelord Nito. And now for one of the hottest takes of the video. At the end of Tomb of the Giants, the worst level in Dark Souls 1, we have the boss where you have mandatory fall damage unless you're doing some fancy exploits. The boss is fairly basic, only really doing 2 things, either doing a screaming beep whistle that shoots a toxic blade right up your ass, or unleashing dark energy and then blowing himself up. This also takes out the infinitely respawning skeletons with him, and by the way, don't go anywhere other than the starting point of the arena, because there's giant skeletons that are ready to kick your ass in the back, and they will make this fight near impossible. Thankfully, some people were crazy enough to feel like fighting down here in the Tomb of the Giants, so thank you Fiona and Dion, you made this trek far less tedious than normal. You could say, oh, you summoned, it doesn't count. Well, I mean, I've already beaten this boss solo and have footage of it, just go watch my Dark Souls 1 video. You won't. For me, this boss is a big case of wasted potential, as Nito should be one of the coolest fights in the game, being a Lord Soul, one of the powerful gods of this world essentially. And unlike the others, he hasn't really fallen into a state of decay since he's already dead and kind of evil, but his fight is just annoying, and while it's not too difficult, it's just hard enough that victory isn't guaranteed, and death means running back through the awful Tomb of the Giants all over again, which is my least favorite area in Dark Souls 1 by far. Also, for some reason, I had a weird thing happen this time when I played through Dark Souls 1 where Patches just randomly decided to attack me the second time I saw him. I didn't do anything else, he just went full aggro, so I killed him. Which I haven't really seen happen in Dark Souls 1 before outside of one time with Marvelous Chester on the Xbox 360 version. Any idea what triggers that? Or am I going crazy? Probably the second thing. Number 24, Bed of Chaos. You may be wondering how this boss is above the other 2 bosses previously talked about. Well, simply put, Bed of Chaos sucks, but despite everyone complaining about how she sweeps you into her holes, I found it basically impossible to die against this boss fight as long as you take your time. This is not to say, oh, it's easy, you suck, it's just I've never died to it. Now, it is tempting to run through the fight to get it over with, but what I found is usually just hang on the outer ends of the arena, keep your shield up, and walk around slowly, and it's not that hard to deal with because all she really does is sweep, and then she has a scythe attack in set locations that's not too dangerous. The only real threat is Phase 3. But, as bad as it is, I do prefer a 2-minute walk through Detroit over the 5-minute walk through Skeleton Hellland. And while the runbacks are bad for both of them, at the very least with Bed of Chaos you can join the Chaos Covenant to skip 90% of Izalith, which I do for every playthrough, because that also is how you get the Sunlight Maggot and save Solaire. All the fights in the bottom 3 suck and are 1 out of 10 bosses, but if I have to pick my least hated of the garbage bin, then it would actually be Bed of Chaos. Still trash, and even if the remaining bosses aren't garbage, we're not anywhere near good territory yet, so buckle up, it's gonna be a while. Number 23, Moonlight Butterfly. This boss is an absolute snooze fest, as the butterfly looks pretty, but it just floats back and forth while casting magic without much interest in an effort to kill you, leading to things like light spears, homing light missiles, and a laser beam. It can also float to the other side of the bridge, and that's about it. This boss just floats around a lot, so it's a matter of waiting until it finally comes down to the bridge to rest for a bit, where you can whack it. Otherwise, unless you've got a bow or sorcery, you're stuck waiting for a good while for the butterfly to land, and even if you do have range, the bow doesn't do much damage unless you wait until endgame to upgrade the crap out of it, and sorcery is resisted, so that's pretty much out of the question as well, unless you've summoned the sorcerer lady. It's one of the most boring fights in the game, but doesn't have quite the hatred that the bottom 3 do for me. Plus, it's optional, though beating it does net you the Divine Ember, which makes completing the catacombs much easier, so I threw it a bonus point there. And, well, it's likely the first boss soul you'll obtain in the game, which is something, even if I don't think I've ever used the spear that you get out of it. At least it's better than nothing. Number 22, Taurus Demon. Many bosses in Dark Souls 1 are ultimately just regular enemies found later in the game, and I feel like the worst example of the bunch is the Taurus Demon. He's got a cool arena utilizing the bridge, and just showing up acting as the game's way of saying, this dude ain't supposed to be here. But he falls victim to the plunging attack strategy, as well as being able to jump off the arena on his own and die instantly, which isn't intentional, but it sure is funny. His moveset's also fairly similar to the Asylum Demon, which was the boss you fought before this, except he doesn't have the fly into the air and ass crash. His design is awesome, but between him reusing the Asylum Demon boss theme and the overpopulation issue down in Islet, this guy feels even less like a boss than the Capra Demon did, and really screams regular enemy we placed in the early game area as a boss. Which is a pretty common issue for Dark Souls 1, as a majority of the bosses in the first half of the game are either reused as regular enemies or mini-bosses in the latter half of the game. But I feel like Taurus Demon suffers the worst from it. Number 21, Demon Fire Sage. And speaking of unnecessary, we have the Demon Fire Sage, which is just a reskin of the Stray Demon. That was a modified version of the Asylum Demon. He gets higher than Taurus because while he is a reskin, he is at least a reskin of another boss instead of a regular enemy, and they did bother to at least give him a fiery retexture. Otherwise, I don't know, I guess his entrance is kinda cool with him breaking through the trees, but that's about it. I don't hate any bosses in the mediocre tier, but I have little to nothing to say about most of them, so let's move on. Number 20, Dark Sun Gwendolyn. Now for an optional boss fight against a Covenant leader, Gwendolyn is a gimmick boss through and through, as you chase him down a seemingly endless hallway that actually does end in order to slay him and get yourself the Firekeeper's armor, as well as the Sunlight Blade Miracle. It's okay, and I have very little to say about the fight. The most notable thing about Gwendolyn is the story, how he's a boy but was raised as a girl due to the moon he was born under, so we can conclude that Anne Orlando is stationed somewhere in California, and Gwendolyn uses the female character model. Does any of this matter? No, not really, because we either non-canonically kill him here, or Aldrich canonically kills them by the time we get to Dark Souls 3. Moving on. Number 19, Centipede Demon. Some people hate this boss, some people despise this boss. Me, I see it as annoying, but could have been okay if they'd made just one change. Give the player the orange charred ring right outside the boss arena instead of in the boss arena. Now, some people may say, well, this boss is the orange charred ring, but honestly, why not just cut the Demon Fire Sage and make this boss the character that the Demon Fire Sage turned into instead of reskinning a boss that was already a reskin? The boss design looks chaotic, but I honestly think it's kinda cool, though I know that's just a subjective opinion there, and I think the various limbs that can all be cut off and come back to life on their own is a nice gimmick where they'll try to attack you. Plus, the boss has different movesets depending on what limbs are active, being entirely physical when all limbs are on, but opting for more explosions and pyromancy when the limbs have been cut off. In a lot of ways, this boss has the makings to be one of the most intricate and creative foes in the entire game, and should be a top 3 slot, at least for the base game, so why does it fall so flat? Well, for one, the arena sucks, because it's 90% lava, and Dark Souls lava kills you in less than 2 seconds, without the orange charred ring equipped. And if you just stick to the islands you fight him on, it often just devolves into him either doing the ranged lunge attack over and over again, or coming onto the island and jump slamming constantly. but with the orange charred ring, the fight becomes a decent little romp, albeit maybe not perfect. This boss also acts as the final culmination of Solaire's questline should you choose to let him discover the Sunlight Maggot. However, he can be saved and even join you for the final boss fight if you embrace the chaos and help out Quelaag's younger sister. And to be honest, she's the nicest Covenant leader anyway, so I always choose to help her. Number 18, Pinwheel. We all know about Pinwheel, the butt of every Dark Souls joke difficulty list, and a genuine bottom 5 for easiest bosses in the entire series. But his cloning mechanic is cool, and his Rite of Kindling is a great reward for victory. Plus, you get one of his 3 masks for winning, which are all very nice pieces of equipment, giving you some sort of buff. And I managed to get the Mask of the Father, which is by far the best one of the bunch, at least in my opinion. Night Rain, please make Giant Dad a boss fight. Even if it's a Mimic Tier clone, I would be okay with that. Just make it happen. Number 17, Stray Demon. It's another reskin of the first boss, so why on earth does the Stray Demon land a few spots and a whole tier higher than his fiery counterpart? Well, for one, I feel like his inclusion is more justified, as you see him as soon as you begin the game, as one of the 2 demons guarding the Undead Asylum, and while we take out the smaller guard, the larger one still remains down below, and you kinda get that feeling of, yeah, we're gonna have to fight you later, aren't we? Plus, he does get a few bonus points for actually having new attacks, even if one of the AoE explosions has a really bad telegraph. I don't, however, recommend fighting this guy before you even have the Large Ember upgrade, but it makes for a memorable encounter and something somewhat resembling a super boss fight. Plus, the boss dropping one of the few guaranteed Titanite slabs always makes it worthwhile to take him on in your journey, unless you're doing a speedrun. Number 16, Ceaseless Discharge. Aw man, I feel bad for you, bro, with a name like that. Anyways, the best of the Lost Izalith bosses, but only because it's less of a boss and more of a level gimmick. All you gotta do is grave rob his sister, then book it back to the fog wall, and he'll hunt you down. After a few good whacks, we show him the strongest force in the Soulsborne universe, gravity. It's nothing crazy, but I think it's a better executed gimmick boss than most of Dark Souls 1's gimmick bosses are, and is overall inoffensive. Plus there is some genuine tragedy to the fight, as he doesn't even try to fight you unless you attack him first or if you loot his sister's body. You can fight the boss straight up, but it's just a mind-numbingly boring fight, so instead, I just say take the free win by engaging with his gimmick that was put in place. Number 15, Seath the Scaleless. Seath is in a weird spot for me as a boss because he's at the end of by far the best of the Lord Soul dungeons. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Duke's Archives is the best level in Dark Souls 1, and he's got the most presence out of the Lord Soul bosses with his giant form, the ethereal looking wings, the first battle against him where you die, on top of him being immortal at first, but the fight is extremely easy as you just kind of walk up to his crotch and whack him a bunch. You do have to break his crystal first, and I originally thought that you had to trick Seath into breaking it because I didn't think, oh, I could just smack it, but no, you totally can. One hit's all it takes. And it doesn't even matter that he has more health than the final boss, as most of what he does is use his crystals to damage you and try and curse you, but really if you have any curse resistance, you're golden. He has some genuinely cool attacks, and as far as Lord Soul bosses go, I think he's decent enough, albeit way too easy to cheese these days. The only real challenge to the fight is if you're trying to get the Moonlight Greatsword because, oh lord, attacking him from behind is actually one of the hardest fights in the entire game because of how spastic those tentacles are. The one thing that I think really needs to be fixed for this fight in a theoretical Dark Souls 1 remake is the boss music. It sounds like an evil carousel and is by far the worst boss theme in Dark Souls 1 as far as I'm concerned. Number 14, Iron Golem. Iron Golem is a goofy boy, and when he's not getting soloed by Tarkus, he's often getting staggered and knocked around, but ultimately I think he does a decent job as a twist on the Tower Knight gimmick, being a fight where you want to knock him off the arena, but he can just as easily knock you off the arena if he gets a hit in. And I like that the giant throwing bombs will impact the fight if not dealt with before the battle begins, because the way I see it, any boss fight that wants you to engage with the level design beforehand is probably going to get some bonus points. A bit odd that a boss with a gimmick around gravity is the last trial before reaching Anor Londo, but I think he's a fun and fairly memorable final hurdle before entering the City of the Gods, and I enjoy him for what he is. Number 13, Lautrec the Guilty. Lautrec is not truly a boss, he's an NPC duel. But you know damn well, if this was any other Soulsborne game, he'd be a full-blown boss fight. and he'll definitely become a boss if they ever remake Dark Souls 1. Anyways, why is this NPC fight above half the bosses in Dark Souls 1? Well, simply put, I think he's fun for me, and the feeling of payback for killing the man that killed your Firekeeper is pretty notable. On top of that, Lautrec is actually a good deal tougher than other NPC opponents, as he has a Shotel that will pierce through shields, making it where you can't just tank up behind a shield to win, and he makes use of a parrying dagger, allowing him to be more dangerous than most foes in the game. Plus, the rewards for victory are actually quite worthwhile, with 5 humanity and the highly coveted Ring of Favor and Protection, which buffs your HP, stamina, and equip load, more affectionately known as the Fat Ring. But he was made way easier in the remaster, with you now being able to use Estus Flask during the fight because you couldn't use any in Dark Souls 1, and that's what made the fight so hard. Here though, it's a cakewalk, but still a cakewalk I kind of enjoy. Number 12, the Four Kings. The Dark Souls DPS test is actually a lot harder when you don't have a maxed out weapon that 4-shots them and high enough level to R1 spam to victory, but the fight is still pretty fun. One of the most intense themes in the game, and the player's first taste of the Abyss in the series, the Four Kings are an imposing foe that looks like they'd be right at home as the final boss in a dark fantasy RPG. The boss has powerful magic and some strong melee attacks, but the real threat is the fact that each king has nearly 2,000 health, and you're kind of on a time limit because after enough time passes, another king will join the battle. Thankfully, all hope isn't lost, as the kings like to mostly hang back, doing little more than firing a magic projectile unless they're the main focus of the fight, so it's mostly going to stay a 1v1, despite some claims that it becomes a crazy rape fest. It's not that bad. It's a tough boss that actually fits the challenge of a Lord Soul boss, and it even has the terrifying grab attack that steals your humanity that's equipped on your character, so hope you're not using a chaos weapon, otherwise it sucks to be you. Overall, I think the Four Kings are a fun and intense in-game challenge, and the only Lord Soul that, if you're crazy enough, you could fight super early in the game, making it a big challenge waiting for you throughout the entire game. I kinda wish this boss fight was optional so it could firmly be considered a super boss, but it still stands as the best of the 4 Lord Soul bosses in my opinion, and it's really not that close. Number 11, Sif. To reach the Four Kings, however, we've got to murder Sword Dog, and this is sadly a non-negotiable. The boss moves at a faster pace than some fights, but unlike the 4 Lord Soul bosses, there's no gimmick here. It's just a straight up fight against a wolf protecting the grave of its master, and even holding an alternate cutscene if you saved repeat in the DLC. It's a simple fight that gets this far mostly on the emotional impact, because while it's not the only sad boss in the game, the fact is, I don't think most people feel too bad about putting down Ceaseless Discharge. Lots of people feel bad having to put down Sif and take him out back like Old Yeller. Number 10, Sanctuary Guardian. Our first DLC boss on the list, and this guy is your introduction to how much tougher the DLC is going to be, as enemies are far more aggressive and a good deal faster as well. The Sanctuary Guardian is a simple manticore here to guard the Ulasil Sanctuary, true to his name I guess. He's got Lightning Breath, Wind Swipes, Charging, Melee Strikes, and an interesting little property with his combos. If he strikes with a Claw Swipe, then a Bite, he's always going to go for a 4-hit combo. Meanwhile, if he does a Bite, then another Bite, or a Claw Swipe, then another Claw Swipe, the combo's finished. It does make some interesting things and makes you have to pay attention to what moves he's going to do, because he's technically got combo mix-ups there. The fight is fairly simple, all things considered, but it acts as a fantastic introduction to the Dark Souls 1 DLC, which was one of the first DLC expansions I ever played, alongside the likes of Episode Alicia from Tales of Zestiria, both of which had Motoi Sakuraba compose the music, interestingly enough. And speaking of Motoi Sakuraba, this is by far the most Motoi Sakuraba sounding boss theme in the entire game. Number 9, Asylum Demon. Unless you're one of those weirdos that started with Demon Souls, this was likely many people's introduction to the Souls-like genre as a whole, myself included. I remember first playing this game and seeing this dude and wondering, how the hell am I supposed to win this fight? I was using the sword hilt, don't feel ashamed, most of us did that our first time. But upon finding a real weapon and getting an Estus Flask, the fight became doable, and sure enough, after a hard-fought victory, you'd conquer your first real challenge in Dark Souls, completely unaware of the horrors that were to come. The fight is very simple, relying on heavy hammer slams and the classic ass crash attack. But that doesn't make it bad by any means. As the tutorial fight goes, it's one of the best in the series and a boss I look forward to upon every replay of the game, even if it only takes me 2 minutes to get to him tops. I enjoy the fight for what it is, and I think it does a good job. Number 8, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. From the start of our journey to the end of our journey, Gwyn is here to test and see if you've learned how to parry and not much else. If you have, this battle will be a simple matter of putting this long gone old man to rest. But if you haven't, get ready for hell, as Gwyn is the most aggressive boss in the game and would even give the modern entries in the series a run for their money. Gwyn isn't easy because you can parry him. In my opinion, he's a hard boss because you have to parry him to realistically win. Or you can summon Solaire if you did his questline and saved him, but shh, I'm making a point here. The boss music works well as a plot point, in my opinion, because it fits the fight perfectly. You're battling a withered old man, once a mighty lord of sunlight, but now a shell of his former self. It's a fantastic song, beloved by almost everyone I know, except Alex, but personally, I'm a sucker for somber piano pieces, and the fact that it's the only boss theme in the game that doesn't have any sort of vocals is a pretty bold but effective choice for the final boss of the game. There's no cutscene, there's no words, only one last battle standing between you and your choice to link the fire or let the darkness arise. Plus, I have to give it a few points since this boss is partly responsible for a meme that I have now run into the ground by this point. You know the one. Number 7, the Bell Gargoyles. Many people consider this boss to be the true Dark Souls starts here experience, which is something I can agree on. Your first Bell Guardians making it your first major boss, as well as the first boss the player is likely to encounter that isn't one of the demon enemies reskinned as a boss. Okay, well technically, Asylum Demon doesn't get reskinned as an enemy, but it's one attack away from being Taurus Demon. The new dramatic boss music, the unique arena, the overall aggression of the gargoyles, it all made for a much tougher battle than those before it, with you fighting the armored gargoyle that was a threat at both ranged and up close, as well as being the first boss to have its tail be able to be cut off to obtain a special boss weapon. Unfortunately, the gargoyle axe is straight up trash, but his helmet and halberd are far better pieces of equipment, with the gargoyle halberd often being my go-to weapon for the game if I can get it. It's also one of the few bosses with a second phase, as phase 2 will see a second, far more damaged gargoyle join the battle that is incapable of flying, having half of its HP, and preferring to hang back and breathe fire, as well as just lower defenses in general. The battle can be a tough one, especially for how early in the game it takes place, but it makes for a very fun and memorable fight, being the first boss I'd consider worthy of great tier, and hey, on a first time playthrough, this is the first time you can summon Solaire to help you out, so that's pretty cool. Number 6, Ornstein and Smo. From one multi-phase gank boss to another, this boss placement might be seen as controversial, as many people love it from the olden days of Souls-likes, when the only games were Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 2 Vanilla Edition before we had even a single DLC. But the truth is, while the fight did lay the groundwork for many fights to come, it has some serious freaking issues, and we need to talk about it. And, well, what are they? It's those fucking charge attacks that single-handedly bring this boss down a full tier on a quality list. A fast and slow gank with pillars in the arena to break up attacks and aggro is fantastic design, but the issue is these two don't stay far apart nearly as much as you might expect them to be, because they both have charge attacks. In the case of Ornstein, everybody knows why it sucks. It stores momentum, and he'll get caught on some rebel seemingly stopping before resuming the charge attack, making it impossible turns with no startup animation. It's a little bullshit. Smo, on the other hand, has a much slower charge, but instead of being one big hitbox, it's multiple active hitboxes that will go on for so damn long, it's basically impossible to properly dodge and roll through everything. You just gotta be on the other side of the arena and hope you get lucky. When you get to phase 2, the surviving member will absorb their fallen comrade's power, obtaining them for the remainder of the battle. Ornstein grows massive, gaining Smo's heavy attacks and ass crash, while Smo gains lightning damage. This phase is awesome on paper, but there's a slight problem. 99 times out of 100, you're going to kill Ornstein first. He's up close to you far more often, he has lower health, and he staggers easier. Smo, on the other hand, has more HP, and if you try to 1v1 him, you'll quickly find Lying Man ramming a spear up your ass. So while it's awesome on paper to pick and choose your own second phase, it falls flat in execution, and Dark Souls 3's final DLC would go on to perfect this idea finally. This is a cornerstone boss fight, and I do love it, but I don't think it's aged as well as top 5 bosses in the whole series have. But hey, if this makes you mad, just wait for the Halo Combat Evolved video. Number 5, Black Dragon Calamite, the prototype of From Software's lineup of great dragon bosses. Or that's what they want you to think. It does still lay the groundwork for the more traditional dragon battles in the series like Sin the Slumbering Dragon, Dark Eater Midir, and Bale the Dread. And while I do still very much like this boss, I also vastly prefer those other 3 dragons over this fight any day of the week. It's fun getting to fight this boss and enact knighthood's finest calling, but it practically demands that you have light rolls ready to go if you want to stand a chance. Mid rolls are non-negotiable, they will get you killed. It gets the fundamentals down, flying attacks, fire breath, and stopping, with cool details that if you shoot him in the eye, he'll actually freak the hell out and begin panicking for a bit. But it has 2 attacks that make me not enjoy this fight as much as I probably should. First of all is his charge attack. It does have a telegraph, but unless you're attacking him from the side, it's very subtle and hard to see, and if not dodged, it'll likely be a full health to death combo since he always follows it up with his black fire breath from behind. But the second and far worse attack is his grab, where he picks you up into the air and inflicts you with curse, making you take double damage for a long time, which means everything he does will now probably one-shot you, which hey, is fine. I don't hate that attack as an idea, but the real problem is the ear-bleeding screeching noise it makes whenever it goes off. Probably the only boss outside of Phantasy Star 2's seizure-inducing mother brain fight that tries to physically harm the player themselves. As an optional super boss at the end of the DLC, it's a satisfying final challenge. But I swear, those 2 attacks are enough to knock it out of Amazing Tier for me. Number 4, Chaos Witch Quelaag. And now for the second Bell Guardian, Chaos Witch Quelaag is here to give From Software fans an attraction to monster girls. Thankfully, I'm a basic man that went for An in Persona 5 and Chie in Persona 4, so I don't have that issue, because Romina is a better boss fight, and she's hideous. Anyways, Quelaag has 2 different movesets, with the spider stomping around and spewing out lava, while she has her Chaos Fury Sword to slash at you in ways that honestly feel pretty fun to dodge. It's a boss fight where you can't tank behind your shield and block everything, but it's also a boss fight where you don't have to dodge absolutely everything. I feel like it strikes a pretty good balance. Throw in some area denial, and you actually have a pretty well-made boss fight with a complex and complete moveset on top of a neat weakness where she always staggers when her human body is shot by an arrow. A fun battle that always feels like a good challenge when I face her, and a trial I look forward to every time I boot up Dark Souls 1 to replay it again for the 27th time. Number 3, Knight Artorias. If Calamite was the template for the big dragon battles, then Artorias is ground zero for the epic knight fights. These last 3 bosses I think have more than withstood the test of time and still hold a spot in the top 20 best boss fights in the From Software series. Artorias is the template upon which all From Software's best humanoid bosses were built upon. And while he's downright simple compared to other big duels like Fume Knight, Gale, Maria, and Mesmer, he still works fantastically even with Dark Souls 1's more dated combat system, and, spoilers, I actually like Artorias more than Mesmer or Fume Knight. He likes his big sweeping attacks, lunges to catch careless healing, and he has some big crazy front flips to close the distance. Even when he's not attacking you, the fight is rarely in a neutral state, as he's often just watching your movements, waiting to see what you're going to do, and then he's going to capitalize. He also has a buff where he can become more consumed by the abyss, increasing his danger level immensely, but this can actually be pretty easily staggered out of with a well-placed arrow shot to the head, which is not hard to do because if you're locked onto him, after a few seconds the arrow will always hit him in the head. Or you can just smack him a lot with a regular weapon. It's both an excellent and tragic boss fight, seeing the descent of this great hero and realizing he wasn't able to complete his mission and die valiantly, so it falls upon you to lay him to rest and finish his mission. And to do that, we must confront the great evil at the very bottom of the abyss itself that struck down Artorias and turned him into the shell of his former self. Number 2. Manus, Father of the Abyss. At the very bottom of the Chasm of the Abyss, we have Manus, this evil-looking motherfucker. I know many people gas up the 1v1 night fights, and I'm no exception, but I honestly wish we got more bosses like this, where it's still a fast-paced 1v1, but Manus is clearly not human. At least not anymore. He's got slams, he's got a 5-hit true combo, and he's got some of the highest health in the game at 6,666. Man is Magus maxing. And he's the master of dark magic, which in Dark Souls 1 was beyond overpowered, and the reason there's a special item designed specifically to counter it, the Silver Pendant. This fight is insane, the design is one of the coolest for any video game boss, the music is downright evil, and the moody lighting really sells the boss fight, and it's
good atmosphere.
In my opinion, Manus is a boss that has aged perfectly and would still feel just as at home in a modern From Software game. Albeit, he would need increased HP to survive the modern day power scaling, and while I'm a sucker for 1v1 duels, I really hope that Duskbloods or whatever the heck From Software releases next gives us more boss fights like this. Or Armored Core 7, I'll take that too. Number 1, Gaping Dragon. Alright, write your hate comments calling me a retard now, I'll take the free engagement, you're just giving me more money. Gaping Dragon is in my opinion the best boss in Dark Souls 1, and I'm not afraid to stand by that. Not just my subjective favorite, but I also think it's objectively one of the best designed fights in the series. See, Dark Souls is a game about overcoming seemingly impossible odds, from your first encounter with the Asylum Demon to your final battle against Gwyn, the Lord of R1 spamming. And Gaping Dragon is a perfect milestone boss. You've rang your first bell, you've slain more or less all the demons in Lordran outside of Izalith, and now you've also probably gotten yourself your weapons upgraded finally. And then you come face to face with your first real dragon. This mutated creature that's become more mouth than anything else, overcome by its gluttony, and a mighty foe with an insane 4,401 HP, which is more than the final boss by the way, and this boss is fought in the first third of the game. So why is this fight fair? Well, because much like Dark Eater Midir, the weakness is his head, where it takes significantly higher damage, and he will be left open on the head pretty often. But you can still attack the other parts of its weakened body for decent damage, and the boss doesn't turn corners quickly. Some may not be a fan of that, but I think its slower reactions are good design, as this is still a boss fought very early in the game, and it gives plenty of time for you to get your hits in and then get out, plus he has very clear audio and visual cues about when he's going to attack, as well as him just having a good variety of attacks in general, from jumping, to charging, to swipes, stomps, vomit, a tail swipe, and a grab attack that he throws you inside his ribcage mouth thing to devour you. This isn't a throwaway boss, it's an event with a sense of scale that is pretty much unmatched, especially in Dark Souls 1. Sure, there are larger bosses in the series, but they're all gimmick fights or Ancient Dragon, which sucks. You now have access to miracles, sorcery, or pyromancy, whatever you may want, as well as a large ember so you can start making your build however you want it to be, and this boss is a playground for experimentation. Plus, he deserves bonus points for being the first unique boss in the game. Asylum Demon gets reskinned twice, Taurus Demon and Capra Demon are regular enemies, Pinwheel and Moonlight Butterfly are less common, but they're still just late game enemies, and the Gargoyles get reskinned to be a mini-boss in Anor Londo. Twice. Gaping Dragon is wholly unique, with high stats and in my opinion the best boss theme in the game. Plus, he has a tail cut which gives you the Dragon King Great Axe, an amazing, if not very practical, boss weapon that I love to use when screwing around in my free time. I fully understand why some people don't like this boss, but to me, this boss is Dark Souls. It's overcoming a great challenge that's downright terrifying and something I'd never seen before. And while it may be overwhelming at first, it's quite doable if you keep a cool head, and in my personal opinion, it stands out as one of the best bosses in the entire Soulsborne series, benefited by its non-existent runback, which has helped it age better than some other bosses. I love it, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. And that's all for this video. Dark Souls Remastered sure is a video game, huh? While some may consider this remaster wholly unnecessary, I'm glad it exists, as it provides players a way to experience the first game in this amazing trilogy that doesn't require modding DS Fix into your PC or sitting through 5 FPS Blighttown. I went through that back on Xbox 360, and I'm glad to finally have this feather in my hat and the Dark Souls trilogy completed in both boss rankings and video essay forms, with Sekiro as a nice little bonus. I hope you enjoyed this video half as much as I enjoyed making it or replaying Dark Souls 1, and if you want to see more content of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care everyone.